Welcome to the Innovation Conversation, a podcast about innovators, both in business and real life. Hosted by myself, Ricardo Pascual, and Harry McDonough.
This podcast is sponsored by OpenExperts.com. Open Experts is a place to go if you're looking to talk with top experts from around the world. That is open-experts.com. This podcast is also sponsored by startupnetworks.co.uk. Startup Networks, it's an online forum where you can find all the resources you need to run your startup. From grants to investors to tips and tricks on how to be successful in your startup. Today with Babita Devi, a coach and a mentor.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Innovation Conversation. Today we are joined by Babita Devi.
Hi, Ricardo. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Babita, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience? Because I know you quite well by now, but would you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, I would love to. So my name is Babita Devi. I'm a growth coach. I help organizations that want to grow both their business and themselves, the founder of the company at the same time.
Awesome. But I know you actually do a lot of work with a lot of startups, right? So can you tell us a bit more about the type of work you develop on that?
Yeah, so I do work through lots of different organisations who have got various accelerators and programs set up. So, for example, here at the University of Cambridge, I work on the Accelerate program, which has been going for about 10 years now. We've had about 350 companies go through that program. But in any term, we normally have about 65 businesses. And so I work as a coach on that program. And that really, there's founders there, everything from having a great idea all the way through to people that want to do a Series A round. That's that full spectrum. Apart from that, I'm also a mentor for Barclays Eagle Labs across all of their centres in the UK. And I mentor for an organisation called Raising Starts, which is a science and technology hub out of Belgrade. In addition to that, I sit on the board of Global Entrepreneurs Network. That's a huge network connecting entrepreneurs across 200 countries. And I sit on the board of some early stage tech companies as well. So a games company, a global online school, and also a growth mindset for children organisation as well. And then I'm a mentor for the Masters in Entrepreneurship students at the university here as well. So do a lot of different things, and I have my own accelerator that I run as well. But in essence, it's all the same stuff, which is really coaching and mentoring business owners to help them through growth of their company and themselves.
I still cannot believe you managed to find time. You're extremely busy calendar to just come here on the podcast. So thank you so much for that. I know.
Oh, you're welcome.
I wanted to ask you, all these things you do and all these organizations you work with, which one is the one that, let me rephrase that, which one is your favorite? Or which one is the one that really, gets you up in the morning and say, I love doing this bit. This is the bit I love the most.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard question to answer, only because all of those organizations that I just mentioned, I'm doing the same thing with all of them, whether it's the university, whether it's through my own accelerator, whether it's even doing, the event that we did with you guys last week. In essence, it's all the same stuff. So I'm really lucky in that I get to do what I love every single day and get paid to do that. But it wasn't always like that. So I definitely have had a business that was out of alignment with who I am. And that really partly led to the Alignment Accelerator, because I am a huge believer that actually there is something that everybody loves doing. And if you've got, I often talk about the golden triangle: purpose, passion, and the third piece, profit. And if you have something that you're driven by purpose and something you're very passionate about, without profit, it's just a hobby. But if there's money to be made there and that's sustainable, then there's a huge, generally that's where people find their joy. So, yeah, I think it's one of those questions that I think if I was to think about it, all of the clients I work with give me scope for that level of creativity and being able to make a difference to the people I work with.
How did you get started in all this?
Oh, yes. My background is all in strategic marketing, business development and commercialization. So I started off in the tech space. Can you believe, actually, I was involved in setting up the very first computer superstore in the UK before it got bought out by PC World and then Currys. So Yeah, so I've got a background, started in tech, went from desktops to ERP solutions. So I went from selling computers to selling software services around the mark of about £1 million a deal at that point. And then from there, I went into optics and heading up a regional team, or a marketing team. And then in 2004, when I moved to Australia, I decided to set up my own marketing consultancy. And I'm a huge believer that marketing is really the heartbeat of every business. So I ended up often working with the business owners because of my approach to marketing. And what transpired was that actually, because marketing cuts across every part of the business, that working with the actual managers and the leaders, resulted in really me stepping into a coaching role and mentoring role a little bit by accident. And then from there, I ended up transitioning a lot of the work that I was doing into coaching and mentoring.
It's quite an eclectic background, I would say, right? Because you went from one vertical to another vertical, but then they actually give you the resources to do what you do right now, and knowledge and expertise, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, even more than that. So my second company was the one that was completely out of alignment with who I am. I moved around a lot, and after Australia, came back to the Midlands, then moved to Oxford, and now live in Cambridge. And my poor daughter, who now is 24, ended up going to 6 different schools. And I decided that I was going to create a better way for parents to be able to communicate with each other. And that's when often I say to people, I created WhatsApp before WhatsApp, because in essence, that's what I created, WhatsApp, for people to be able to connect and speak with each other, rather than trying to find out who's got the class, the Excel spreadsheet with all the parents' details on, or who the class rep is. I thought, wouldn't it be great to have just an easy way to connect? And so, yeah, I spent some time developing that product. I spent time learning how to code, learning how to manage developers, learning how to use Jira, learning how to raise investment. And that was a tough time, because really I'd spotted an opportunity that I was excited about because I needed the product. And so it came from a very personal need. But creating a tech company was completely the wrong thing for me to do. And after going on that journey, I decided that actually there must be so many people who spot an opportunity and decide they're going to do something. And absolutely, I could have made that work, but I needed guidance and coaching along that journey. I think just thinking, let's just set up a tech company without having proper support was a really difficult thing to do. So I decided to close that business and focus on coaching and mentoring. But none of that was wasted, none of that time or that effort or energy, because what it allows me to do now is to really help business owners by understanding some of the challenges that they might be going through. And the entrepreneur's journey is tough. It's one it's one of the most difficult things to do, and if you don't have the right support in place, it can get really challenging.
You often mention being aligned with who you are and what you're building. So, what advice would you give to a young entrepreneur, someone who's just getting started?
Yeah, I think, like I said, the journey's tough. And if you're not loving what you're doing every day, that's a waste of a day. So what I would say is you have an opportunity to really create something that you're passionate about. It can't just be passion. There has to be market opportunity and all of that stuff. And aligning what you have with what the market needs. Product market fit is a super important piece. In fact, I shared a post on LinkedIn yesterday trying to get people to focus on one product, one market, one route to market, and that's it. Just perfect that in the early days, especially as you're going from zero to that first million. And in particular, focusing on what I often see with founders and entrepreneurs is that, they want to jump into that early majority way too quickly. So just to focus on just the early adopters. Your early adopters will tell you everything you need to know before you can get to that early majority. And so creating a business that's, you're excited about it, that you want to get out of bed and start working on, and something maybe that, here's a question, would you work on that business if it didn't pay the bills? Is that something that you could be equally passionate about? Now, don't ever fall into the trap of thinking you need just follow your purpose and your passion without making sure it's profitable. But that's a really good indicator. And then what you do is you find a way to make sure that you can actually generate income from that idea and make sure it's sustainable and has the potential for growth.
All these entrepreneurs you meet, can you often tell who's going to be successful or not? Is there something that you can just pinpoint, you know what, that person's going to be super successful? That one, I'm not so sure about.
Yeah, it's very, I'm going to say it's easy for me to spot. And I'll tell you why. The drive comes from a different place. People who I've seen go on and become successful, sometimes, I mean, okay, let's face it, sometimes it's a lucky break. But these people are unstoppable. And that's what I mean by you have to be driven from the inside when it comes to really, this journey is tough. And I think if you're not driven by that it's the fire in your belly has to come from more than just pounds on the revenue that you can generate. And I think that is a big part of it. Sometimes I see founders who are driven, who are opportunistic, let's say that, and there's nothing wrong with that. This is not a criticism of those people, and many people do well, right? I mean, the pandemic's a perfect example of many companies that were able to take advantage of opportunities left, right, and center. But a lot of those companies are not around today. And so if you have something that you are very passionate about, that you believe in, and that makes a difference to other people, product, service, the smallest things, the more niche, the better, I always say. And so if you have that type of idea, then and you believe in it, even when everybody else around you doesn't believe in it and you believe in it, then that's the making of successful companies. And I've seen that happen time and again.
So, okay, but if I'm the founder and I have that idea that no one else around me believes in it, how can I tell I'm not going crazy and actually I should persevere with my idea? What validation can I get from the outside world if no one else around me believes in that idea? How do I get that?
So you get validation from the market. So don't be under the illusion that people around you, your circle, will understand necessarily your product or idea. What you need to do is understand from the market whether there's validation in your idea. And there's another level of complexity to that, in that you might have a great idea that the market needs, but if you have an inability to communicate that effectively and the market doesn't understand, then that's also going to hold you back. So it's about more than just, you can have the best idea in the world, but unless you're able to clearly articulate it to your market at the right time. So if you think about the events that you're running, for example, with getting founders together and giving them an opportunity to pitch their ideas, that really is attracting a certain type of entrepreneur who's very early in their journey, or is preparing to do a raise. If you pitch that same event to somebody who's doing a Series A, it would fall flat. They wouldn't be interested. So this is really about understanding, okay, what does the market need? What sort of environment do they need in order that they can actually share their message with the world? But a large part, if you think about what you're doing, is you're giving people the confidence to stand up and do their elevator pitch. And there aren't many forums that create that type of environment, which is why what you've seen is this whole snowball effect where people are wanting to be on stage and have the opportunity to do that in a relatively safe space. That's the other thing. So it's about really understanding, what is it the market needs and how do we create the right environment in order to be able to support that.
What's the one piece of advice you always give to all entrepreneurs? What's that one thing you keep on saying time and time again? It feels like they never listen, but what's that one thing you keep on saying?
Yeah, so I'm a huge believer that your business is a vehicle for your personal growth. Everybody creates their companies, and I've seen this many times, because they're looking for something. They're on their own journey of growth. And that is great. And the whole time the business serves you in that way, you're excited. The day that stops happening is generally when that statistic of 50% of companies don't survive beyond the first 5 years. That's generally what's happening. People get bored, lose interest, shiny new object syndrome, there's something better to go after, it's too hard. There's many reasons, but ultimately it's because the business isn't really serving you that way. But the flip side is also true. Your business is an entity that needs something from you. So understand what you're looking for from your company, but also understand what does it need from you in order to survive. And the two are separate. You are not your business. And in the beginning, whilst founders can become at one with their business, the moment they create that separation is where they're able to start to make strategic decisions on how they need to show up and what the business needs from them as well.
Do you think it's hard to raise money right now in this current market?
Yeah, and I think it's hard, and there's definitely certain sectors that are getting more investment than others. So, and it's regional as well. That's the other thing, right? So know where to go to get the money is a really big part of it. So, for example, I'm in Cambridge, east of England. We're investing a lot here in. Actually, historically, there was a lot of investment going into pharma, med tech. There's a lot going into AI here, deep tech. So you have to think strategically around where to go to get that investment, and look carefully at the type of organizations that investor might be interested in as well. Otherwise, you can spend a lot of time knocking on the wrong doors. But yeah, look, it's always tough to raise investment.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big things that investors look for when it comes to investment is the team, right? They want to, because ultimately, somebody could have the best idea in the world, but unless they've got the right team to execute that, then that's always going to be high risk. You could have an exceptional team with an average idea and they'll do well. So people is a really big part. And if you are looking for investment, based on how much you're looking for, always be mindful that it needs to be more than just you. The team needs to be bigger than just one sole founder, because one sole founder equals high risk.
Is there any magical wand or magic wand that you can go and magically fix this? Is there like a super easy solution for raising investment, or not really? It's all about getting the numbers and making those connections, calling people up.
I think the deck is important, and people don't always fully understand the objective of what the deck is for. The deck, that initial deck, has one single purpose, and that is to get you a meeting. So you don't have to disclose every single piece of information in a deck. The deck is about whetting somebody's appetite so that they want to have a meeting with you. And I think sometimes people get all caught up in trying to have everything in a deck, so that generally puts people off. The other piece as well is, don't understand the addressable market for sure, but make sure there's a direct link between the market you're trying to address and how much money you're asking for. So if you're saying, the market's worth millions and I need £100,000, well, there's clearly a disconnect between what you're trying to do, the addressable market, and the investment you're putting into your business of that size in order to make sure that you can address that market. So go after reasonable and realistic targets and make sure that the ask that you have in your deck reflects what percentage of the market you can address. And if there's a disconnect there, that sometimes comes across as that the founder maybe isn't knowledgeable enough about what's needed to capture that marketplace.
What advice would you give to entrepreneurs dealing with rejection? Because what often happens is we talk to a lot of investors. Some will say no. Well, most of them will say no. So how do you deal with that? Is there any advice you can give there?
Yeah, look, it's a numbers game, right? So you've got to get the rejections to get one person to say yes. The most important piece is understand a couple of things. First of all, anytime you pitch, anyone that listens to you can potentially become a salesperson for you. That requires you to be able to clearly articulate exactly what your value proposition is. But if you can, even with a potential investor sat across the desk from you, who then says to you, actually, this isn't the sort of thing that we normally invest in, then the question is, well, do you know any other investor that might be interested in investing in this? Because investors know investors, right? But so there's a couple of things. It's always ask. So whoever you speak to, if they can't help you, ask them, can they introduce you to someone who can? And then secondly is make sure that any opportunity you have is always recruit your sales team. communicate your value proposition in a way that somebody else can then go on and talk about what you do.
Do you find that, for example, I'm going to talk about the events because we met due to events. How important is actually going out to events and networking? Like, is it relevant or not so much?
It's very relevant, and I'll tell you why, for a number of reasons. First of all, the same thing as what I just said, right? So you have the opportunity to pitch what you're doing to other people, and then they can go on and talk about it. The number of times that I've come away from an event and I'm like, oh, I know this company that's doing this and this and this, and LinkedIn makes it pretty easy to connect with people as well now. So for sure, that's a big part of it. The second part, I think, is an interesting one in that the second point is interesting in that the more you articulate what you're doing, you also are reinforcing it to yourself. And you need to hear that, especially in the early days. It's not just about sharing, sitting in, within your own four walls and thinking, okay, how do I make this work? You need to be out in the marketplace and sharing your ideas with people, and almost like you're looking for that validation back from people that they understand what you're talking about. And so that piece, I think, is super important and can only really be achieved through going out and networking. And then the third piece is that the more you're out there, the more you're able to spread the message, spread the news, connect with people. And sometimes, it's not always about making sure that you meet with investors. You might meet with a strategic partner. You might meet with somebody who's faced a similar challenge to what you're facing, and they've addressed it in a certain way. So for founders, I would say networking is super important.
And the course you run, the accelerator you run, what type of companies do you normally get? Is it just mostly early stage companies, or
it's been a real mixture? So it's designed for early stage companies. It's not designed for although I work with founders who have done Series A rounds, but that's more one-to-one. The program is based on 7-step process, which is, as I said earlier, like the very first step is about separating the founder from the business. But then I take them through different elements of growth for themselves and their company. So to give you an example, if you think about pricing, so one of the steps is all around pricing. And when people think about pricing strategies, the traditional way to look at that is, bottom up and top down. So, let's take our costs and let's put a margin on that, and that's the price that we can use. Or we could look at it top down. What's the real value we're providing to the marketplace, and therefore what does that price look like? However, all of that then, that's the external part when I talk about the business side. If I then look at the internal, what's going on internally for a founder, and this is why I talk about parallel growth, the founder and the business. What's going on internally for the founder is that they are determining the pricing strategy, which is based on their relationship with money. So quite often a founder will look at pricing from a very internal perspective based on how they feel about money. And so with every single one of these steps, what I do is I take people through these elements of how to separate yourself from the company, but then how do you look at branding? What's the company brand? What's the personal brand is another great one, because people quite often have imposter syndrome around that and don't want to be the face of the company. So I've got some ways of helping people to step out of that, and then we go on and we look at how to promote effectively, because in essence, I've said to people that nobody wants what you're selling. Like, you really have to get your head around that. They don't want what you're selling. What they want is the outcome. They want the outcome, and therefore, how do you communicate that effectively? So the 7 steps is really designed around everything from organization structure to those an extension of the 4 Ps, and we go on. But the final step is all about growth, because that comes back to this principle of actually the reason you created your company in the first place was for growth. So the real question that matters in all of this is that, did you grow? What decisions are you making in your business for your personal growth? And actually, then if you look at the external strategy within that, the business strategy is about the ripple effect. Because when you're growing, you're able to have a much bigger ripple effect. And so, that's that program is really what I've been working on since. In fact, it came from, I was asked to put together a presentation for International Women's Day for the University of Suffolk, not this last year, but the year before that. And it was the first time I sat down and I went through my diary and I thought, wouldn't it be great to share a data point around how many companies I've worked with over 12 months. And so I went through my diary and I counted how many coaching and mentoring, how many companies I'd worked with on coaching and mentoring just in those 12 months. And it was 109 companies. And I knew it was a lot for 109 over 12 months. So then I spent the summer going through that data and working out, why is it that some companies progress really quickly and some companies take a bit longer? And Barclays, for example, they get feedback on every single one of my sessions from who I've been mentoring. And, they often give me feedback saying, you're one of our top mentors. And, but I was thinking, why isn't every company progressing at the same rate? And what I found was that sometimes the business owner can get all caught up in personal development and stuck in the loop of perfection to the point that they're kind of hiding behind that when it comes to doing something in the business. Or the opposite can also be true. So they're really clear on how to grow the company. They know exactly what strategies to go out with, but they are getting in the way of that. So unless you have the two in parallel, it's very hard for a company to get to that next level of success. So really understanding, okay, where am I at and where's the business at as two separate entities is a big part. So that summer is when I decided to build the program, the Alignment Accelerator. And then since then, I've also written the first draft of my book, which is called Alignment When You Grow, Your Business Grows, which again is based on the program as well. So and by the end of, when people go through that book, I've been really mindful to make sure that people actually have something tangible that they can use after going through the book. So I've created a business blueprint, which people can, when they go through each chapter, they can do the exercises, and then by the end of it, they can actually have something tangible to use and see how much they've grown, because even growth happens in cycles. So as you're going from 0 to 1 million, you'll go through a level of growth, but as you go from 1 to 10, you'll also go through a level of growth. So that whole journey is fascinating as founders go through that.
So how do you get out of your own way?
So getting out of your own way can be a lot to do with programming, a lot to do with the environment in which you grew up. It can also be a lot to do with, when I say environment, I'm talking really about, were your parents entrepreneurs? And sometimes I see that founders who had successful entrepreneurial parents can get stuck in this loop of fear as well, because they're afraid to make decisions because they might get it wrong. And so they have to be right every time. So for example, with my own background, my dad was a serial entrepreneur. So he tried many businesses, but failed at many businesses. And what that taught me was resilience. So I have no problem at all trying something, because what's the worst that happens? You fail, you get back up and you carry on. So, but many people are afraid to do that because they haven't seen what failure even looks like. So when you're operating your company and making decisions for the business from that place, and not making a decision because you might fail, or not making a decision because you don't have enough data to prove that it's the right decision because it has to be right, that holds people back. So on a level, I'm really talking about an inner child that can get in the way of a business person. But so many founders operate in that way. In fact, I'll give you an example. There was a lady who I started working with 18 months ago. I'm actually on her board now. But when I first started working with her 18 months ago, that very first mentoring session I had with her name's Carol. The very first session, she won't mind me talking about this, by the way, because I've talked about her. I got her permission and I've spoken about her in the past. So in that first session, she turned up and she had, honestly, Ricardo, the biggest asset list of any company I've ever worked with. So she was sharing, I've got, and this is the company that's got the product growth mindset for children. So she'd created published books, she had online games, she had board games, everything that you could think of. And really well done, and all based around this concept of a Yeti that couldn't roar. And she was teaching children about growth mindset. She herself had been a teacher and a counsellor, and then she was an entrepreneur, or is an entrepreneur. And she shared with me, she said, you know, I have like so many great tools and the feedback is always amazing and the schools love it and everybody loves it. And I said to her, you know, so what's the problem? And she said, well, the problem is that I can't get revenue to the next level. I'm struggling with growth. And this is quite often a big challenge that many founders face anyway. And when we dug deeper into, okay, so what's holding you back from growing the company and the team? And she's in that conversation, she said, oh, I know what I need to do. I need to hire more people, but I need to be in control of like what's happening. And so straight away, it was clear that there was a huge element of control. And that's not unusual as well. So what we then needed to do was unpack where's that coming from. So what transpired was that when she was 14 years old, she was a primary carer for her mom who was ill. Her mom had MS, her dad had a heart condition, and she had two younger siblings. So she was a primary carer. And so, but the only way that she could manage all of that was through this level of control. Yeah. And so what was happening in the business was that she was trying to grow the business. She was getting all overwhelmed with everything that needed to go on, but she needed to have complete control. And the minute that she realized that, and she recognized that, oh, okay, that's where I'm making that decision around control from, she was able to let go of it. And then since then, she's gone and done great things. And, you know, she's got a product at the DNA in Dundee, and she's in conversations with the BBC, and she's developing a digital character for the Yeti, and the schools have been super excited and have taken it up. She's just announced she's working with a charity a few weeks ago, and hugely taken off. And really, so that's a great example of where, without even realizing it sometimes, we can have, I'll call it the inner child, but it's really a subconscious behavior that can take over and start making business decisions for us.
Is there a way for us to identify that before it's too late? As an entrepreneur, is there a way for us to just, ask a couple of questions and say, you know what, I keep on finding the same issues time and time again, and it's probably because of this, and I need to get some more help to help me get to the next stage? Is there like a way of finding that for anyone, or is it really a process and it might happen to some people, might not happen to others?
So do you mean in terms of like recognizing that there's something holding you back?
Recognizing that there's something holding you back. Like, for example, you were talking about this lady, and because of the conversation you had with her, she was able to recognize, actually, it comes from my background, it comes from the experience I had as a teenager, taking care of my parents and my family. That's why she needed all this control. But is there a way for people to recognize that all by themselves, or do you think they always have to start off?
Working with a coach or a mentor is going to get you to that place faster. If it's something that you want to do on your own, there are ways that you can do that. So, for example, I encourage journaling for people. And when I say journaling, I'm talking about very specifically writing down questions and answers. So you can definitely start to ask yourself a question around, okay, what's holding me back from growing my company? And you write the answer to that. And then you ask the next question and write the next answer. And if you go through a journaling exercise and write out journaling and do it for at least 20 minutes, and then you go back and you read what you've written, what you'll notice is that at some point, and it's normally kind of halfway or 2/3 of the way through what you've written, that you drop out of your head and into your heart space. What you're really looking for is not the logical reason why you're making decisions. You're looking for some of these patterns and behaviors as to why there might be an underlying belief system around why you're making certain choices and certain decisions. So definitely when you're making decisions, you can always ask yourself, okay, is this the right decision? And where's the thought process coming from? It's a relatively hard thing to do unless you do something like a journaling exercise, or if you're able to speak to somebody and get them to ask you the right questions. And asking the right questions is really about unpacking where decision making is actually coming from. I often, when I do my coaching and mentoring sessions, anyone who's ever worked with me, in that very first session, I spend half of that session understanding someone's childhood, because just by understanding that, I can really unpack quickly what might be holding somebody back in their company. And also, it gives me a lot of insights into why they're creating the business that they're creating. And founders don't always necessarily make those two connections. So, in fact, I had this last week with somebody where he explained, and he was very left brain. So when I say left brain, very, he'd come to the session very prepared, solid thought process around why he was creating the business he was creating, went through and presented the argument as to why this was a much needed service that he was developing. And then when we went back to his childhood, what he realized was that this is the product that he wanted as a child. This is something that he wanted as a child, and something that he thinks would have made a big difference to him growing up. So there's so much of how we show up and what we want to do, which is driven from the inside, that we don't always recognize until we do that piece of work. It's a bit like, so I quite often give people a values exercise to do. Have you ever done a values exercise to understand your own values?
How does that
work? No. Okay. So values is super important because they play out in how you show up in your business all the time. So a really simple one to do is, if you imagine you've got if you draw a chart on the horizontal axis, you plot your age. So you go from age 0 up to about the age of 17 or 18. And on the vertical, you plot emotion. So at the bottom, you have sadness, and at the top, you have your memories, all your childhood memories up to about the age of 17 or 18. So you're plotting the lows and the highs and anything of significance that you can remember. And when you look back at that, and then when you look at the low points, what you'll recognize is that actually those low points form part of your value system. Sometimes the highs, but mostly the lows. And so if you go through those, what you'll start to see is any significant life events form part of what becomes a non-negotiable for you without you even realizing it. So I'll give you an example of how this plays out in business. So for me, because of a childhood incident, people often say, one of my core values is honesty. But for me, it really is, because I had a childhood incident where that was compromised. And so the example I wanted to share about how that plays out in business is, I was working with a copywriter who was working for me and another business at the same time. And I asked if she would be able to just do some copy for me one of the afternoons. And she said, oh, yeah, no problem. I can do that for you because I've got time this afternoon. And I said, well, I thought you were working for the other business this afternoon. And she said, oh, I'll just tell her I'm sick. And now some people might look at that and think, oh, she values my company more than the other company. And isn't that lovely? But actually, after that, I couldn't actually work with her. And she was probably doing something that she thought was, oh, it's okay because, for whatever reason, she made a decision to that was her choice. But for me, it became a point where actually there was just I hit a brick wall with working with her. And so, but that, having that level of awareness about yourself and where decisions might be coming from in your business is super important for founders and entrepreneurs. And so that values exercise, it's so simple to do. And it's hugely powerful, but it really does help you to unpack a lot about how you're showing up in your company.
So becoming an entrepreneur is not so much about being a successful business owner. It's more about the journey, isn't it? It's more about the realization that you do certain things because of your past, because of values. It's because you want to implement some change in the world because of everything that happened to you, and you want to make it a better place. So it really comes down to that, doesn't it?
It does. And here's the thing, is that any entrepreneur who thinks that they're going to be happy when they hit their first million, their first 5 million, that point in time is so small, because the minute you hit a million, you'll be thinking, how do I make 5? The minute you hit 5, you'll be thinking, how do I make 10? So that chase is ongoing. So that's like never fulfilling, right? But the most important part of that is, how did you get there? What was that journey like that you took to get to a certain place? People often, when they are successful, if you talk to any successful business person and you say, what's your recollection of good times in your business, they'll always talk about the good old times when they had the struggle, because everything is about the journey. It's about, okay, what did I have to do to get here? And that's really what brings fulfillment, is that level of growth brings fulfillment. Yes, work hard and get to a place where your business is successful, but don't think that when you get to a specific point in time that you're going to feel any differently to how you feel in the lead up to that point in time. So be mindful of how you're showing up every day, rather than thinking I'm going to feel differently at a specific point in time.
So it really is all about the journey, isn't it? It's all about the connections you make with people, connections with people you meet, but obviously, but also the transformation you go through inside, right? Because if you're just chasing currency, it's not going to make a difference, is it? I mean, you might get a lot of things, but
yeah, and look, there's all sorts of data around, when you hit a certain income level. Then the other big one, I guess, with this is that being able to, hitting certain income levels requires you to be able to deal with a certain level of problems, right? Because every size of business comes with a different set of challenges. And so the journey is really about building you as an individual, building resilience, and getting you to a point where you're able to go through that next level of growth as well. So that whole process of, there's a level, when people go through growth, there's a level of detachment that needs to take place as well. There's that whole level of separation that we talked about earlier. So there's many layers to this, and recognizing why you've created your business in the first place is a big part of what will ultimately then help you shape how you want that to unfold going into the future. I think there's many people who think that actually, I just want a successful business. But what's your definition of success? Does success mean freedom of time for you? What, does it mean freedom of money? And if it is money, what does that actually look like? Would it make a difference to you if you had 10 million or 50 million in the bank? What does that look like? And by the way, you can also have a level of resistance to money as well, right? This is one of the things to talk about in the Alignment Accelerator, which is, what was your experience of growing up with money? Like, did money cause problems in your household? And therefore, actually, you think you want money, but actually you don't really want money, because it's like, there's all sorts of, who am I if I'm the person with the money? Am I, you might have had somebody who was disliked in your family circle growing up, who had a lot of money, and everybody didn't like that person. And therefore, are you subconsciously deciding that actually I don't really want money? I'm saying I want it, but actually I don't really want it. And that all of that unpacking takes place on this journey of entrepreneurship. The real question is that, how much do you want to grow?
So before your book comes out, and until let me phrase that, until your book comes out, which I'm very much looking forward to reading, which books would you recommend to someone just listening to the entire conversation right now? Which ones would say, pick up this book, it's amazing?
Yeah. One of my all-time favorites is Never Split the Difference, I think, which many people have read now. I mean, the classic is obviously Simon Sinek's book, but I'm trying to think what else I could recommend that maybe most people wouldn't have heard of.
I actually haven't read Never Split the Difference, so I'm going to add it to my list right now. So.
Oh, you're going to love that. It's full of really, it's all about negotiation. It's a fantastic book. So there you go. Okay, so I would say Never Split the Difference. That's my all-time favorite.
And which one are you reading right now?
So at the moment, I'm actually hooked to Stephen Bartlett's podcasts.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm all about the podcasts at the moment. I kind of go through a bit of a phase. I definitely spend a lot of time in personal development, and especially there's a lot in the space of personal development which is starting to unfold as we start to understand a lot more about behavior, understand a lot more about how the brain functions, and all of that stuff is fascinating. But yes, I would say Diary of a CEO is the thing that
So not the innovation conversation, it's just
absolutely, and that for sure. Yeah.
Well, it has been going on for 2 years, so he has like a leg up on us on that. We're picking it up slowly. Babita, it's been absolutely lovely. If people want to reach out to you and contact you, how can you do so?
So the easiest way is on LinkedIn. So if you look for my name, Babita Devi, on LinkedIn. And also I have a website, which again is my name, babitadevi.com. So definitely can reach out through that as well.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ricardo.
This podcast is also sponsored by startupnetworks.co.uk. Startup Networks, it's an online forum where you can find all the resources you need to run your startup, from grants to investors to tips and tricks on how to be successful in your startup. This podcast is sponsored by openexperts.com. Open Experts is a place to go if you're looking to talk with top experts from around the world. That is open-experts.com.